Okay, Practice Underwater Friday. We are back with another episode. We have George here. We're talking with Phoebe, who is our doc who bought a practice 4 years ago with a giant patient pool of 4,000 patients, and is at a pivot point of, do I drop insurance, shrink the practice, or do I commit to growth and everything that comes with it? Which would you choose, George?
Well, we talked about in the outro last time how the practice itself has such a green light for so much internal growth that financially it just makes so much sense for her to grow the practice, even though she might not want that long term. I still vote just grow it for a year, get all the growth, and then if you want to move on, then now you've made a lot of money. You can extract that equity, and then you can go on to something smaller at a different practice. But this individual office has so many patients that it just needs to grow. Like, you have to grow it. There's no other move here.
I love it. Well, let's jump into it. I know we left the last episode on a cliffhanger, so we're all at the edge of our seats here. Let's get in part 2 with Phoebe and Suzanne.
Welcome back to another episode of Practice Underwater. I have my guest back today. Welcome back, Phoebe.
Thank you. So I purchased my first office in 2017, merged it with a second office that I purchased in 2018, and now have myself, 2 other doctors, 15, sometimes 16 staff members, and we are running a busy show, and I am trying to decide what route. Everybody talks about getting to this point. I'm here now, and I'm trying to figure out, where do I go from here? Do I want to keep being this busy, or do I want to consider dropping insurance or dropping not profitable procedures? And that is the crossroads I'm at.
Excellent. So we left everyone last week with that sort of like cliffhanger on we're at a pivot point. Which direction are we headed? So again, just giving everybody an update here on a few metrics. We have 12 and a half doctor days. We have 16 hygiene days a week on average. And we've got steady growth from 2018, 2019, and the most recent 12 months were, so we went from 1.3 in 2018 to 1.7 the last most recent 12-month period. So let's get into the nitty gritty here. Patient base wise, I keep saying it's a large patient base. What does a large patient base really look like? We're talking about 4,000 active patients in the practice, about 3,800 that have been in hygiene at least once in the last 18 months. Okay. So we talked about the way we're actually scheduling. So you've got a 40 and 50 minutes for some patients. Any 60 minutes? Very few?
We do 60 minutes for new patients.
New patients. Okay. So we've got varying times. And is that because the hygienist kind of decides what kind of mouth this is and schedules ahead, or?
So in general, we book on the 40-minute for typical recall prophy. If someone has additional needs, the first question we ask is, are there additional needs, meaning that they need to be in perio? And if they're in perio, then we do 50 minutes, sometimes even a little bit more than for perio patients. And then new patients, 1 hour. Hygiene does not really determine. We just stick with the 40 minutes as our goal, although I am very flexible on that.
Okay. So part of the decision as you're questioning whether or not to go down the road of, do I term some of these insurance plans that we have that are not as great reimbursement versus, the volume that you have currently in the practice. And the question becomes, on the flip side, what are the pros and cons to that? And what do you lose out on either side, right? So before we kind of go down that road of that discussion, I just kind of want to give the audience an idea, and you, of certain metrics like, okay, what's our appointing ahead ratio? So if that's something you're not necessarily looking at, here's one of those, maybe surprising. The hygiene department is reappointing at a rate of about 79%. So what does that really mean in terms of how many patients are walking out the door not scheduled for their next appointment? That's about a little over 100. Mm-hmm. So if you're seeing a number of patients, say 500 patients, and we have 100 of those that are actually leaving without scheduling their next appointment. 100 times 12, we know what that's going to look like down the road,
Sure.
right? Okay. So that is it because the team doesn't really have enough time? Like in a 40-minute time span, how realistic is it to think that somebody's going to make sure that that appointment is scheduled in the future? So is that handed off to the front? Are they doing it chairside?
Yeah, so typically they're doing it chairside when they're waiting for the doctor for the exam. And then if they don't schedule, we try not to have patients leave without an appointment. That was definitely not what was done in the past. A lot of times the previous doc would be, okay, see you later. Call me when you need me. Kind of a mentality. And by default, because of that, he has a ton of one-off emergency patients, which I'm still managing. Because that's a very different flow and a very different vibe from what I'm looking for. I want comprehensive care. I won't, for example, do a root canal and a crown on a patient who hasn't had their teeth cleaned. Maybe I would get them out of pain, but I'm not going to do definitive long-term treatment without looking at everything else. And in years past, that absolutely would have been done. And then that patient would have, fallen off of the radar, called back in a year, and now they need another root canal and crown. So we've really pushed towards changing that. If a patient's not scheduled in hygiene, they are scheduled at the front desk. I do have a lot of patients, and maybe I'm wondering if some of that is from COVID. I don't know. That number doesn't surprise me necessarily, just because I hear people when they're leaving for various reasons why they don't schedule. But, I definitely want that number to be higher.
Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about the relationship between COVID here, what I'm pointing out is the hygienists actually scheduling ahead right now. So in the month of April and March, historically, we're seeing less than 80% of the patient base being scheduled. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
And then right, exactly. And as a whole, how many do we actually have scheduled ahead of those who have been seen in hygiene at least once in the last 18 months is 70%. So 70% of your patient base actually has an appointment in the future if they've been seen at least once in hygiene. But on the flip side, 30% hasn't, right?
Sure.
Okay, so we know the impact of that. And so, my mind goes to how comprehensive can we really be? Because I hear you say comprehensive. How comprehensive can we really be if we're seeing a patient for 40 minutes and the expectation is intraoral camera usage, pulling up, helping with co-diagnosing, all of that, and building enough value for getting the patient. You've heard me say many times on the podcast, right? Let's build value. Let's make sure the patient is scheduled ahead. And this is going to sound like a tough comment, but when you talk about the previous owner and changing some of those systems, it's been 3 years and 2 years, depending on which practice, right? So 4 recare cycles to actually get the hygienists into that mode where we should be appointing ahead but I'm feeling like things are so busy in your practice that it's really hard to do all the checks and balances that are really needed. So when you balance this, when you're kind of weighing and juggling all of these aspects, are we really getting to a point where we're affecting the ideal care that you're talking about with patients if they're not scheduled in the future and we don't see them? So crazy statistics here. I'm going to get on my soapbox for a minute. Crazy statistics here. If a patient walks out the door without scheduling ahead, there's a 50-50 chance they will be back or they'll delay their appointment for 2 years. So, something, I think, again, we're on that cusp of pivoting here. Something has to be done differently for us to actually see these patients as new and get them scheduled in the future. So on that note, let's talk about new patients. Between, an average of 50, 60 new patients a month too, right? You're actually welcoming a bunch of new bodies to the practice. Mm-hmm. But only about 50% of them get scheduled ahead in the future. Of course, those are encompassing some of the new patients that are new coming in for emergency exams. But because we're so busy, do we have the time to really be intentional with the conversation of let's convert them to a comprehensive exam? Right? So those are the areas we're kind of busy. But if 50% of them are not actually staying with you, it feels like you're recreating the practice every year and are needing that many new bodies to take care of this leaky bucket that we have quite a number of patients here that don't have an appointment and are in limbo. Does that make sense?
Absolutely does. Yeah.
So the other thing that comes to mind when we're talking about these 40 and 50-minute appointments, and I hate to harp on these 40 and 50-minute appointments,
sure,
but it is having an impact on just like the relationship with the patients.
Sure.
So retention is one thing. The other thing is when I look at what is being accepted by your patient base, that's high. I'm loving that. Patient acceptance is high, but the amount actually or the number of patients that you're diagnosing on that are having exams isn't terrible. I'd like to see it a little higher. Out of 600 exams, it's 250 approximately that you're doing diagnosis on. I wonder and question, are you in a rush? Are the doctors in a rush and are not necessarily getting all the needs out there every time there's an exam, right? That part also is average per exam. So if we're looking at what's being diagnosed, it is on the low side. I'll tell you, historically, it's been anywhere between 300 and 350. So every time you do, one of the doctors does a diagnosis, that amount tends to be on the lower side.
Sure.
So if we take a step back and say, okay, is this, 40 and 50-minute appointments, are they actually getting us the result we're looking for? Or do we tend to bring in a whole bunch of bodies to the practice on a daily basis, but we may not be getting them to either accept the dentistry down the road or accept their next appointment?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. So the office that I had purchased, so I figured this would come up. I will say that in general, we do lean conservative in the office. So, and part of it too is, some people wait for that one complex treatment plan, and just as an FYI, we do almost everything in the office. I place implants. We restore a ton of implants. I don't typically do a lot of endo. I just tend to do the surgery. I graft and all of that. My associate does a lot of endo. She does a lot with, sleep apnea. She does mostly for kids. She's doing a lot of that, some interventions there. And so in general, when I purchased my office, the previous owner had a goal of like 70 crowns a month, something ridiculous. My patient base has been heavily crowned. And what comes from that, what I have learned that comes from that is a lot of patients who need old crowns redone or have non-restorable crowns and they need implants, which is why I did implant training. I was referring out an unbelievable amount of implants, cases that would be, and I had trained on implants as a resident. I just didn't feel comfortable until I got the CBCT placing implants. So, but I absolutely agree. I mean, I know that this conversation is a tough topic, when it comes to what I pay my hygienist per hour and what I'm getting typically reimbursed for a pro fee. And this is probably part of it too, is the business side of running a business. Am I okay? And I know in some markets it does. I know hygiene can run at a loss, but it's not supposed to be profitable, but we don't want to be doing it to service. And I will say that a goal of mine moving forward would be to be able to provide better, more attentive care during hygiene. I will say that I don't think our patient base expects any different because they've never had different. So keeping in mind, they're coming from 40-minute hygiene and that's done, elsewhere. But also at the office, the second office I purchased, he was doing 30 minutes and the hygienist would leave and go see another patient. So I would love to provide a longer hygiene appointment.
Mm-hmm.
I it's financially feasible. And when I say this, keep in mind that when you see as many hygiene patients in a day as we do, we oftentimes have holes. We oftentimes it does not feel like we run too far behind too often. Every now and then you'll get someone who holds things up for whatever reason, but it feels okay. I would like for it to be better.
Mm-hmm. Have you taken a look at fees from the perspective of not only the insurance relationships, like those who are, self-pay? When I look at the amount of hygiene per visit and some of the areas that we can capitalize on, like fluoride, adult fluoride, which is on the low side, and perio, which is on the low side.
It is
in a practice of this size, right? And I think it goes to, as a hygienist, I mean, of course, I want to make sure my patient is getting the best care. But I am pressed for time. And so maybe I'll talk about this next time. Maybe I'll just say, hey, we'll get to this next time. I'm doing a cleaning for today. I know that's not necessarily ideal, but I just don't have the time. And in my schedule, I don't know if I can actually, fit you in before 3 months from now, basically. Right?
No, absolutely. That absolutely plays a role.
Mm-hmm.
Say that we did build up a perio program. It is definitely a work in progress. So this was not done in the past, but I will dismiss patients if they need perio treatment and are not getting it, either through us, or we actually have a periodontist that's not too far away. I'm sure our perio percentage is low. But if someone needs perio, they have true, we do probing annually and evaluate the periodontal stability often enough that if they need it and they aren't getting it, we will not continue to do a prophy because they want a prophy. So that is something that I think we do well. We do refer out to the periodontist a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I have one hygienist who doesn't give anesthesia and I would say that maybe like scaling is not it's maybe not her. She doesn't do anesthesia, so then and I think she doesn't want to hand off her SRP patients to someone else, so she will often refer out to the periodontist as well. I mean, we decide that together, but that is something that I would say she does more.
And I don't think it has to do with case acceptance, because it looks like whatever you guys are recommending, patients are going to say yes to. So that's not the issue. In my opinion, I don't know that we're talking about it as much as we should, or maybe we're just referring out everybody, which could be kept in-house. So our average hygiene visit is on the low side, right? That's, under $100. And it really should be higher. So when was the last time you evaluated your fees? Either with a PPO company or just on the UCR side? Was it recently done?
So we have never used a company. My office manager looked into it last year. We dropped a plan and picked it up under an umbrella network. And that is the furthest we've got. I don't want to give away too much of my location, but it's very challenging in this area, it's just a PPO driven area. Reimbursement rates. And I don't know how much detail you can see, but some of the plans are like 50%.
Right. But there are better insurance.
Yes. Yeah.
There are better insurances than others. You know what I mean?
Yes,
and so, so I would suggest on that list, let's reach out to like a profitable PPOs and have them at least do an analysis of your fees and which are the insurance companies. So let's kind of reel it back in for a second. At that pivot point where you said, hey, should I go down the road of, closing the tap on some of these insurance companies versus looking at continuing down that road? And, how big is it big, basically, right? How big do you grow this practice in terms of volume? And you've got a lot of bodies coming in that may not continue or may delay their appointment for a couple of years in the future. So if at some point big is really big,
yes.
I think it's time to kind of say, okay, which are the insurance companies that we are comfortable keeping? Which are the insurance companies that we are not going to, kind of be in relationship with? And there are many patients, contrary to popular belief, there are many patients that will stay. Even if they'll go elsewhere, maybe not have that great an experience, come back to you. So I wouldn't necessarily be worried about that. But we've got sort of an issue of reducing insurances and looking at the value of the appointment that you're offering and the value of what you're diagnosing, making up for the volume of the practice. And those who really want to stay and continue to be serviced in your practice are going to continue to stay with you, insurance or not. But those, unfortunately, that are insurance driven may choose another practice down the road, because you're providing a different level of care. So that's kind of the decision. And if you said, Suzanne, is it the right time for me to do this? I would say absolutely. Go down the path of investigating this, because at some point, like I said, how big is too big, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say that at this level with this staff size, I am very comfortable, and I couldn't imagine, for example, more operatories or, more patients coming in than what we already have. I would like to, for all of us, front desk assistants, hygienists, to be able to work, not have to work as hard and be just as profitable as we are, would be my long-term goal. And you mentioned about patients acceptance. In my area, our patients, I'm in I would consider it a rural area. It feels rural. We're actually not that far from a major city, but my patient base is very, very willing to accept what we tell them. They absolutely think that we have their best interest at heart. My patient base is fantastic. If I recommend an implant over a bridge, they will get the implant done.
Right. Well, and again,
Maybe.
I hear you say implants, endo. I hear you say that, but I don't necessarily see
it.
I don't see it in the numbers because, one, I don't think you guys maybe have the time to do it. I mean, I'm hearing you say my associate does a lot of endo. You do implants. I don't know how much of it is being done if actually per exam we're diagnosing about $350 or less. So those numbers are not adding up for me, right? So I think you'd be doing it a lot more often, and you probably would have a lot more time to build value for that type of dentistry, and maybe do more of it if you weren't rushed doing that many exams. Are you doing an exam a year, or are you doing an exam twice a year?
Every visit.
Okay, every visit. So that takes you away from the patient and the procedure that you're doing quite a number of times throughout the day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So is there also, we're actually short on hygiene days too. So this brings another topic up.
Yes, we are.
Mm-hmm. So just again, looking at the schedule and dental intel, I mean, I do see some opportunity to add some hygiene hours and do some split shifting on the days where you're open till 7. For example, you have a hygienist that is working from 11 or 12 to 7, but that morning time seems to be open. So is there a way to maximize that and add? But again, you're adding and those short appointment times to at least get patients in, and then coming up with a plan on when you reschedule them in the future, scheduling them into a 60-minute time frame.
Sure. Yeah, and that goes into that sounds fantastic. Do I want to increase available hygiene appointments when I'm also considering dropping insurance? And I don't know. I don't know the answer.
Mm-hmm. So
is that I don't want to be overstaffed, and I also don't want to have anybody sitting around. That's not fun for anyone. And I'm a little bit concerned that, and I would love, my long-term plan would be to move to longer hygiene appointments. And this is actually something I hadn't considered was what do we lose the ability to diagnose? We absolutely, we are definitely, if a patient has a complex treatment need, we're going to see them in our operatories anyway. So we don't finish it in hygiene. We get them in the back. We'll do intraoral photos in the back, and we do that a couple times a day. But are we losing out on something by trying to see more patients? And would it make more sense to go to a longer appointment time? And then do I need more hygiene hours at that point? And I don't know if you would know that until you drop insurance and see how things go.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I do think that we definitely have a not enough hygiene slots available.
Okay. So you're booked out so far, and we have 1,500 unscheduled active patients that you have seen in the last 18 months. Mm-hmm. I would say add hygiene. Add hygiene as you're dropping insurance. Do you really think 1,500 patients, depending on which insurance plans, do you really feel like 1,500 patients are going to now mass exodus leave the practice?
Yeah, probably not.
Probably not. Probably not. So I would say do both of those things. Negotiate and decide on which plans you're going to drop. Add hygiene for sure. Now let's go back to your schedule. With as busy as you are and your office manager, this feels very much like hamster on the wheel, right?
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I mean, do you really need to be clinically 4 days a week? Or do you need to be 3 days a week clinically and 1 day managing the practice from that perspective, doing all your management tasks that you could be working on, even if it was half day that week? And at this point, your associates, I mean, they should each have at least 2 hygienists to check from. And so
Sure.
there are days where you don't necessarily, have that. Adding hygiene, do you need to have 4 clinical days, or do you feel like having 3 clinical days and having 1 on the practice? And that doesn't mean right away, but kind of planning for that so that you can work on all of these different aspects of the practice.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that I like doing dentistry. I enjoy a lot of the parts of it. I like the 4 days a week works right now, but I do need more time, especially now that my home life is a little different with a baby. Definitely could see myself benefiting from more time in the office to do that. I would probably do, 4 days, because I currently work a half day. I currently work a short day. One of those 4 days is a short day. I could see myself doing something similar with another day where I would still come in and see some patients, or maybe plan for them to be larger cases, maybe, an implant in the morning and an implant in the afternoon.
Right. Or a half day just out of one op and really, just the larger cases that you like doing, basically.
Yeah, and there's something to be said. We talked a little bit about the challenge that comes along with running such a busy office and being in charge of such a busy office, is that it is hard to hold people accountable or make plans, make changes, follow through on things when you are really busy. It feels good to be busy. Our patients are wonderful. And we really feel like we're doing, a good service to them. We're getting people in if they call as an emergency, even if it means sidebarring them, but it is hard to make change. It is hard to become more efficient. And, my goal of all of us being able to work less, but still maintain the same level of profitability, I think is something that you see a lot when you're busy. It is hard to hold people accountable. And I could use the extra time to, follow through with some plans, make plans, and see them to their completion. Definitely.
I think that would be smart. Now, just to your point about busy doesn't always mean productive, as we
Absolutely.
know, right? And busy
Absolutely.
can be chaotic. And
Absolutely.
so, to our point about the office manager, I don't remember if we talked about that last week or earlier this week, but your office manager is also needing to do the same thing in terms of delegating,
Absolutely.
delegating and training,
Absolutely.
and really making it such that she is able to concentrate on the tasks that only she can do, and to trade off those tasks or to delegate those tasks that others can do. These independent roles and responsibilities, the reason we hone in very strongly on these areas is because we know that we can have more accountability for the results. So, as you continue on with dental intel, which I hope you'll do, is your office manager having people that are reporting to her from a leadership standpoint. So with as many team members as you have, do you feel like you've got some leaders on this team that you and your office manager can either groom or start working with? A leader in the hygiene department, a leader on the assisting
Sure.
department.
So that is something that we have discussed in the past. So unfortunately, I don't have an assistant who would make a good leader. My assistants work really well together. I don't have someone who stands, for example, above the others. I also don't think that I have an assistant. I would love to have a lead assistant. That would be fantastic. I don't have an assistant who I feel like would be good at telling other people what to do. Most of my assistants just seem to internalize frustration, and then they'll verbalize it to me later, but they are not great at explaining to other people what someone's doing that's frustrating them. So then, to put any of them in that role where they're now expected to lead a team, they're all about the same age. They're all about the same, they're moms, young, none of them sort of stand out above any others. They're all great, but not one of them feels like a leader. And sort of similar for my hygienists. I really don't have one who, there's 2 of them who are there more often than the others. Maybe they could be in a role with some authority, but they're all sort of in this, I also couldn't imagine them, coming together and telling someone what to do. My office manager is fantastic at telling my staff members what to do. That is absolutely the role that she has, and she is good at that. She's so good at it that I don't feel that anybody else could be comfortable doing it, including myself. It is hard to be at the level she's at. She's very honest, and she will. She has the authority in the office. So
if you absolutely feel there is no one on the team in those areas, you need to find or groom.
Find someone.
Honestly, find leaders.
Have you ever had an office that has had, I have this hygienist at the front who's doing front desk duties because of a disability, but is a trained hygienist? Have you ever had an office that's considered having someone as a lead hygienist who is not actually a hygienist, is a trained hygienist, but is not performing hygiene on a patient?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question.
As like a hygiene coordinator, maybe not the lead hygienist, but a hygiene coordinator, because she's familiar with their needs and can handle things from their perspective. That's just something we considered.
So my only concern about that, which, is probably, the only concern that I have would be whenever something new is coming up and she's having to train something new, say you decide to use a new product or decide on something new, she's not going to be there in the trenches to actually be using it necessarily. So that would be the only concern is she able to train anything new? Usually the lead is, adapting whatever new things you bring into the practice. So it wouldn't necessarily be my ideal. I think it is somebody that is actually living and breathing in the back too with patients that will hold the level of respect of the other hygienists also. So
absolutely, that makes sense.
So I think as a patient care coordinator, I think she'd be great. I think as a treatment coordinator, she'd probably be great too, because she really understands how to convey value for dentistry and understands, each component of that clinically as well. So I think that would be great. Like assistants and hygienists make great treatment coordinators, but I'm not so sure she would be the leader of a hygiene department if she's not back there in the trenches. That kind of would be my opinion.
That absolutely makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
So if we can't groom someone into that role, I would recommend that be something on your list to do, because and in each of those departments, it is a large burden for the office manager to be carrying that weight and having to do all of those tasks. And I think, at some point, the office manager tasks are going to almost suffer if she's really hands-on with all the other things, right? Patient, one-on-one or treatment planning or, whatever that may be. So grooming the team members to be in that role and then her taking over and having the leads report to her. You've heard us talk about the book Traction, right?
Yes, I have. Yes,
and if you've read it, you've kind of heard about leaders being able to report then to the office manager, having these meetings regularly. That really helps her also have a better pulse on each of these different areas and come up with solutions rather than just having everybody have a complaint session about what's not going well in team meetings, right? They report those issues that you mentioned, they're kind of good at internalizing those situations that are not so fun. Well, they go to their leader and share that, and the leader is then kind of coming to the office manager and saying, here are the things we need to work on. Here are the things my team sort of is feeling. Or,
that makes sense.
And then accountability for the results. So it doesn't all fall on the office manager's shoulders.
No, absolutely.
Okay. The other patient base number that we need to pay attention to is that growth, either positive or negative trajectory. And so when I look at how many patients are in this sort of leaky bucket, if we want to call it that way, and how many patients are new to the practice, you're kind of losing the same amount after an 18-month period as you're actually bringing into the practice, which is why I'm saying if we are on a negative trajectory every month, sort of like negative growth, then you're just replacing these bodies with new bodies.
Absolutely. That makes sense. Sure.
And without the systems that we talked about in place to be able to kind of take care of that, either leaky bucket or the new patients coming in and making sure they're reappointed, then we're always going to just replace. And you're going to be at this place where at some point you're going to plateau and become stagnant at that point. Okay. So harsh words here, but as harsh as I can be, because I know, George is going to say you're always so nice, but so strong words here. Okay. From the perspective of, I think your practice could be producing a lot more. Sure. And it could be a lot more efficient as opposed to you feeling very chaotic. So you also having time to work on the practice as you work in the practice clinically as well is going to be important, like we talked about.
Absolutely. I agree completely.
Okay. What particular questions might you have for me that we didn't address yet?
Nothing that I can think of. I think that was extremely helpful. You definitely planted a good seed where and moving forward, I will chat with my ladies about a few things that I think I knew some of it. I know losing patients I feel like I have a lot of patients who don't like to pay their bills, and that's just a holdover from the previous practice where they were allowed to make $25 payments for years. And so my hope is that I'm filling my office with good patients who come in for routine comprehensive care, who do come in, every 6 months as they should. Everybody gets the people that don't like to come see us, and they come in whenever they have a problem. But I would like it to be more leaning towards good comprehensive dentistry. I think it's better for everybody. It's easier for us. It's better for others if we treat them as a whole. And so, stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, and even if we're just looking at that piece of the pie that is 0 to 6 months, patients you have seen in the last 6 months, we're not talking about those patients you haven't seen in a long time that we're making $25 payments a month. I mean, there's quite a number here. Over 600.
Falling off the radar.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Sure.
So, and again, we're talking about this from the perspective of making some of these changes that actually affect, increase productivity to a certain degree and decrease the stress load, which is why your question was absolutely, absolutely the right one is, should I look at my insurance relationships and evaluate that? Or do I just keep growing? And keep growing and volume just means replacing bodies, adding more hygiene, adding more to the facility. And like we said, growing bigger and bigger and bigger, and how big is enough, right?
Yes, we stay on rollerblades all day.
Exactly. So, my recommendation would be to look at the productivity per patient and look at the efficiency and the value of that as opposed to the number of bodies.
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
sure.
That makes sense.
You have the luxury. You can do that.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
Good. Awesome.
Wonderful.
All right.
Perfect.
It was an absolute pleasure to have you on our show today. Thank you so much, Phoebe, for being our guest.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much.
All right. All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening in to Practice Underwater. We'll see you again next week.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed part 2 with Phoebe and Suzanne. We are back with George. And George, you really confirmed your bias in that intro, pushing this person who doesn't know where she wants to go into the model that you like. So I need you to discuss that a bit.
Really? Again? It's okay. Can we take the word bias out of it? Bias means I have a preference on what they do.
I know. I really mean that word when I say it.
Really? So okay. So listener,
wait. I'll prompt you here. So you're saying to do what is in the best interest for the practice,
yes.
like putting more focus on that versus what the doc might want to do.
Yes, and what I'm saying is an 8 to 9. How many ops is this thing? 8, right?
It's about to be 9.
It's about to be 9 with 4,000 patients. That's the key. 4,000 patients in the database. So this is a very rare asset. Matt, how many times have you seen 4,000 patients?
Once.
Alex Sharp's office, right? They have 4,500.
I was thinking Clay Shrinky's office.
Oh yeah. They got a high amount too, I think. Yeah. Maybe it's his. Yeah, his is 4,500, I think. Mm-hmm. But it's, these are very rare practices with that much. I mean, we're all dying for that problem.
I would literally kill for that.
I mean, I would not literally kill for
Yeah,
this.
I mean that was a little much, but
That was a little much to say on a recorded show, but come on, man.
Don't splice that up. Take it out of context.
Yeah, don't just take that line. I wouldn't go that far.
I like hyperbole. I'm sorry, but good.
Yeah, no, I mean but I'm with Matt in the concept that I would do a lot to have my hands on a practice with 4,000 patients, and it would be a disservice to that rare of an asset to do anything other than honor it by giving it a home large enough to treat all of those people. That's what I'm saying. And so I have this infatuation with group practices. Yes, totally. I'm in love with them. And so I'm maybe very passionate about how this practice is very much a very straightforward, like built for a group practice. This is supposed to be a group practice. That's the play with this office. Objectively, no bias. I love it, which is a bias, but that's not why I say it. And so for this doc, whether or not her preference is a solo practice ownership or group practice ownership, they own a group practice. So it would be, I mean, think about how much wealth are you taking away from yourself by making this a solo office? Like it would be one of the dumbest financial moves in their career. They could just like grow it for a year and then sell and go buy another office that's small. That has little patients.
A lot of dentists think is it's actually the opposite, that I'll actually be more profitable, make more money if I do the more of the shrinking, no insurances. They discount two things. I think winning on volume, like having more patients with just you win that way, and then
diluting fixed costs essentially.
And diluting fixed costs, getting above that number faster. And the other thing they can't get over is like looking at the details of like this insurance pays this much for a pro fee, and I'm going to lose money on this insurance, so I can't stand to have it. When in reality, you're going to win pretty much, I would say, all the time on that insurance. If you're doing restorative treatment, if you're adding adjunctive services, you can win on a low paying insurance.
This is sort of like a casino being like, every time the dice land on black, I lose money. And it's like, I mean, it's not really the case, it's like sometimes the casino loses money and sometimes the casino makes money, but over the volume, over the large haul, they come out ahead. And it's the same thing with dental office, like with the PPOs, like certain procedures, you might not do well, but lifetime value of the patient, lifetime, all of like over the lifetime of that patient, which is how you kind of have to look at it a little bit more holistically, kind of like a casino, the lifetime of a patient, like it's kind of in our best interest to keep them.
And especially with a bigger patient base, it's even
more amplified.
Like, if you're a smaller practice, then maybe I can see that, like wanting to do that, because each patient matters more to the production of the office. Whereas this bigger office, it's the opposite.
But think about it, right? Where did this mindset come from? This is a mindset taught to us in dental school by our instructors who owned single offices. So this mindset works in a single practice. Like if I have one assistant, one hygienist, one front desk, then like everything's a percentage. And I'm thinking I'm never diluting my fixed costs. Like I'm never really getting there. So this mindset makes sense. But there comes a time where we have to graduate from the mindset that works in a $700,000 practice. And we need to pick up, a way of thinking about a practice of this size and caliber and skill level. And so, it takes a different mindset around certain things, because when you start factoring in associate pay and like your percentage game and like how much overhead you have can start to get, you can start to really see that the casino loses money every once in a while. And, and you need to start zooming out a little bit to look at the larger financial picture of the whole practice. Think of your net worth as well. Like the net worth piece is a big one. Like it's essentially money you're saving in the bank just by growing your practice.
That is not thought of. Keep harping on that, please.
I will, because again, it's the casino analogy. Like look at the whole picture. Don't look at if they have ace, jack, and blackjack, the casino loses money. It's like, but what of the whole customer experience that whole night? All of the factors, all of the factors. There's net worth, there's stress, there's happiness, there's vacation time. There's, so many things that play here. It's not just a percentage of overhead. Like that's a very simple kind of almost overly simplified, not accurate way of looking at it. It's overly simplified because, dentists were never taught how to run a business. And it's very unfortunate that we as dentists were never taught this. So, there are companies like us who are started and do very well because we're sort of introducing these concepts to dentists for the first time.
Yeah, because I mean, you go on Facebook and you see what the lay dentist is talking about. They're ripping on insurance. I go there every day. I see something ripping on insurance, a letter,
And it's just sad. It's sad that this mindset keeps propagating in our industry. Like, it's sad that, and then there's these environments where it gets stronger. Like, you go on Facebook, and if you're in that environment, you think that what because everyone's saying the same thing,
right?
So you think it's true, and it's very unfortunate because a lot of the points being made, and like, think about my experience going on Facebook, right? I don't go on dental Facebook groups, clearly, right? I don't think anyone's seen me comment there for a very long time. But back when I have, it got frustrating because it's like every single post was if I was going to respond something, it was going to have to be a very long explanation explaining a lot of things and then getting a lot of flashback from dentists that are, getting triggered and bothered by my viewpoints. And so it's like, what's the purpose of even going on that environment? You know what I mean? Like, what are we accomplishing here? I think that's the thing I love about our Facebook group is they don't do that in our Facebook group. It's like, we have the mindset of our listeners answering these. It's like the one place where like our questions, I'll always look at it. Our questions are answered properly, Like, I'll call out a group, like, one about like the business practices of dentistry or something like that. I won't say the specific name, but like, it's like a bunch of dentists on there that don't have that mindset, and it's quite obvious.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of defeating when, giving your viewpoint is just going to be completely not agreed to by anyone reading it.
And then people question your character. That's the worst part, the Dental Town thread I did. Like, I started that with great intentions and I just got destroyed. Like,
see, you're not a Reddit user. So when you go on Reddit and you comment something that is going to be contrarian to what a lot of people think, you get downvoted. And sometimes you get downvoted to the point where they don't even show your comment. You have to like do a separate click to even see the comments because it's so, against what everyone is supporting.
Oh, wow.
So
those are the comments to look at, right? Because those are the things you want to see. You want to see people thinking differently.
Yes. Yeah. Depends. But yeah. Switching gears a bit, I want to talk about the manager delegation piece and how she's gotten to some of it, but hasn't really like fully integrated it. So what do you think in Phoebe's case this could provide to her if she's actually utilizing this person in a way to help her out with the managerial side?
So if you remember, Phoebe was sort of her chief complaint was that she is too stressed for the size of her practice. She wanted to sort of downsize her practice and all that conversation. And so that conversation obviously is the direct effect of not having proper management and infrastructure in place to do a lot of the ownership for you. A practice of this size, it should not be more stressful. It should be actually almost like stress less or much less stress because you should have people in place doing a lot of the day-to-day functions. So that's the delegation piece, is making sure that office manager needs to remove out of a staff member like role. We need to stop thinking of the office manager as staff and thinking of them as leadership. And in leadership, we don't have daily functions that are like day to day for practice operations, like check in, check out, all of those things. That's not really the way it is.
Well, here's where it's going to need the mindset growth from Phoebe, because she talks about at one point of that she's worried about staff members sitting around maybe with nothing to do. And that's kind of what you're confronted with when you take a manager from, I do the insurance or I do the claims or I do the treatment presentation to I don't do any of those anymore. Okay, what is this person going to do? And you kind of foresee them, they're just going to be sitting around until like, I don't know, a staff member is upset or something and there's something to like actually deal with. So did you ever have any of that fear of like, well, now what is this person going to do who I'm paying, a good salary?
Well, I did. My office manager actually had that concern. She was like, what am I going to do? Like, she's like, you keep taking my job away. And I'm like, no. I keep making room for your real job. Now you talk to her and she's sort of like the most, oh my gosh, I'm so busy all the time with everyone's, because now everyone knows she has an open office. So they go in there and they tell her concerns and, so they know she's available and then they go utilize her for things. And then she can actually work on the practice. Like, we're actually implementing things. She's actually working on keeping things dialed in. Our practice analytically is performing its best when she's her most open because she can be making sure that things are happening. Like, hygienist fluoride percentages are high. They're taking the x-rays that they're supposed to take. We're collecting all the things. Like, she can audit all of our strategies to make sure that they're working effectively. That's a full-time job.
Yeah. I mean, if you're Phoebe or a dentist in this position listening, I would take a log of everything you do related to the practice. And can this be passed off to a manager and done at the same or higher level? Because now this person has more time and devotion to it.
I love that.
You'd be surprised what you find.
Yeah. I love that. Like, every time you do something, write it down on a piece of paper. Like, I just submitted a lab case. I just talked to my office manager about this. Like every time you do something related to owning your practice, write it down. You'll start seeing how many things you do on your list.
And if George's manager is listening to this, I completely commiserate with thinking that where did my role go? Now I'm not in that anymore. I'm on something else. This is something George does to me and a lot of us at shared practices. And it was unnerving at first until I finally like understood why you were doing it, because you were putting in me in my more like my inherent strengths can shine more in this type of role rather than the one I was in before.
Yeah.
So it's weird at first, but then you get used to it. And
you learn to trust it. You're like, what am I going to do when I have more availability? And then you just trust that when I have more availability, there will be more things to do. That's what happens with a growing business. Yep. All right. I think we're going to wrap it up there. That was just great. I mean, I think, that was awesome. So
I loved what Phoebe brought to the table. I think her practice is super interesting. Again, I love that she's at an inflection point and she came to us for guidance. This is perfect. If you're in any of this kind of scenario, please come on the show. We love having you here and love talking about you, and really enjoyed the discussion today, George.
Yeah, it's awesome. Thanks guys for listening. We'll see you guys in another episode of Practice Underwater.